Maria Santos grew up in a small farming town where people believed certain jobs belonged only to men. When she announced her decision to join the military at 18, her father shook his head and her mother cried. The local recruiter looked her up and down with doubt in his eyes. "Combat roles are different from what you see in movies," Sergeant Williams told her during the recruitment interview. "You sure you wouldn't prefer medical corps or communications?" Maria had heard these questions her whole life. At school, teachers suggested she focus on nursing instead of engineering. At the local shooting range where her grandfather taught her to hunt, other shooters whispered that girls couldn't handle the pressure of real combat situations. But Maria knew something they didn't. She had been shooting since age 8, learning patience and precision from her grandfather who served in Vietnam. While other kids played video games, she practiced breathing techniques and calculated wind patterns. Her grandfather taught her that shooting wasn't about strength or aggression. It was about calm focus and perfect timing. Basic training proved even harder than expected. The physical demands pushed every recruit to their limits, but the mental pressure on Maria felt twice as heavy. Drill Sergeant Torres seemed determined to prove she didn't belong. "Santos, you think enemy bullets will slow down because you're a woman?" he shouted during weapons training. "You think they'll give you extra time to aim?" While her male colleagues faced standard military pressure, Maria endured constant questions about her capabilities. During live fire exercises, instructors watched her more closely, waiting for mistakes. Other recruits sometimes helped each other, but Maria often trained alone. Despite the challenges, her shooting scores consistently ranked in the top 5%. Her physical fitness improved rapidly, and her tactical knowledge impressed even skeptical instructors. Yet whispers followed her everywhere. "She's good now, but combat is different," soldiers said in the mess hall. "Real pressure breaks people." Advanced infantry school brought new challenges. The training simulated real combat conditions with smoke, noise, and chaos designed to test soldiers under extreme stress. Maria excelled in marksmanship competitions, but some instructors remained unconvinced. Captain Rodriguez, her company commander, called her into his office after a particularly difficult training exercise. "Santos, your technical skills are excellent," he said, shuffling through her performance reports. "But I'm concerned about deploying you in active combat zones. Have you considered specialized roles that might better suit your strengths?" Maria had proven herself repeatedly, yet the doubt persisted. Every achievement seemed overshadowed by concerns about her gender, rather than celebration of her abilities. During final training exercises, she demonstrated exceptional performance under simulated combat conditions. Her ability to remain calm, while others panicked, caught attention from senior officers. Colonel Martinez, observing the exercises, made notes about her consistent accuracy, even when explosions and shouting created chaos around her. Still, when deployment orders arrived, Maria found herself assigned to a relatively quiet sector. Her unit would be stationed at Forward Operating Base Delta, described by commanders as a low-intensity posting suitable for mixed-gender units. The base sat in a strategically important valley, but recent months had seen minimal enemy activity. Command considered it perfect for soldiers like Maria, who needed to prove themselves gradually, rather than face immediate intense combat. Her fellow soldiers accepted her presence but remained protective, almost parental in their attitudes. They assigned her to guard duties during quieter shifts and paired her with experienced male soldiers during patrols. "Nothing against you personally," explained Staff Sergeant Kim, her squad leader. "But if things get serious, we need soldiers we know can handle extreme pressure. Combat changes people." Maria understood their caution but felt frustrated by their assumptions. She had trained for the same scenarios, passed the same tests, and demonstrated the same skills. Yet she remained untested in their eyes, an unknown quantity despite her proven abilities. The base's routine felt peaceful compared to training scenarios. Morning patrols checked perimeter security, afternoon duties included equipment maintenance, and evening shifts involved monitoring communication systems. Enemy activity in the region had decreased significantly, leading many soldiers to treat the deployment as relatively safe. Intelligence reports suggested local insurgent groups had moved their operations to other regions. Drone surveillance showed minimal movement in surrounding areas, and local informants reported no unusual activity. This peaceful environment actually worried Maria more than dangerous assignments might have. How could she prove her capabilities if no challenges arose? How could she demonstrate her readiness for combat if combat never came? Her marksmanship remained sharp through regular practice at the base's firing range. She maintained her physical fitness with daily workouts and continued studying tactical manuals. But practical experience remained elusive. Other soldiers began treating her deployment as confirmation of their theories. If she was truly combat-ready, they reasoned, she would have been assigned to more active sectors where fighting occurred regularly. See? Command knows what they're doing, some whispered. They put her somewhere safe. Maria knew that high-risk assignments went to soldiers with proven combat records. Without opportunities to build that record, she remained trapped in quiet postings that reinforced others' doubts about her capabilities. The irony wasn't lost on her. She needed combat experience to be trusted in combat, but couldn't gain experience without being trusted first. This circular logic kept many female soldiers in support roles regardless of their training or abilities. As weeks passed at the forward operating base, Maria settled into routines that felt more like camping than military deployment. The surrounding mountains were beautiful. Local villages seemed peaceful. And threat levels remained consistently low, but something felt wrong. Intelligence reports showed decreasing enemy activity. Yet, local informants had become increasingly difficult to contact. Routine patrols found evidence of recent movement through areas previously considered abandoned. Maria mentioned these observations to her squad leader. But her concerns were dismissed as nervousness from an inexperienced soldier. Veteran soldiers assured her that mountain regions always showed signs of movement from local wildlife, smugglers, and nomadic families. You're seeing threats where none exist, Sergeant Kim explained. That's normal for new deployments. Everyone gets paranoid at first. Yet Maria's grandfather had taught her to trust her instincts, especially when details seemed inconsistent with overall patterns. Something about the region's quiet felt artificial, like the calm before a storm rather than genuine peace. 3 weeks into her deployment, Maria's concerns proved justified in the worst possible way. Intelligence had been catastrophically wrong about enemy movements in the region. The attack began before dawn on a Tuesday morning when most soldiers were still sleeping. Maria was pulling guard duty at the northern watchtower, one of 4 observation points surrounding the base perimeter. The assignment was considered routine, almost boring according to other soldiers. At 0430 hours, she noticed unusual movement in the tree line, approximately 800 meters from the base. Through her night vision scope, dark figures moved deliberately between trees, too organized and purposeful to be wildlife or local civilians. Maria immediately radioed the situation to base command. Control, this is North Tower. I have multiple contacts moving toward the perimeter from grid coordinates, November 7-3. The radio crackled with static before Sergeant Kim's sleepy voice responded. North Tower, are you certain? Drone surveillance showed no activity in that sector. Confirmed, Control. Count approximately 15 to 20 individuals moving in tactical formation toward the eastern approach. Within minutes, the base's alert system activated, jolting everyone awake. But the enemy had planned their timing perfectly. As soldiers stumbled from their bunks and rushed to defensive positions, explosions rocked the base from multiple directions simultaneously. The attackers had positioned mortar teams in the surrounding hills, raining shells down on the central compound, while infantry units advanced from 3 different directions. What intelligence had missed was a coordinated assault involving nearly 200 fighters who had infiltrated the region over several weeks. Maria watched from her elevated position as chaos erupted below. The northern approach she was monitoring suddenly came alive with muzzle flashes as dozens of enemy fighters emerged from concealed positions and charged toward the base perimeter. Control North Tower. Large enemy force advancing on my position, requesting immediate support, but support wasn't available. The simultaneous attacks on multiple fronts had stretched the base's defenders beyond their limits. Radio chatter revealed that other watchtowers were under heavy assault, and the main compound was taking concentrated fire from mortar positions. North Tower, maintain your position, came the urgent response. All available units are engaged. You need to hold that approach until we can reorganize. Maria realized with crystal clarity that she was alone. The nearest friendly position was over 300 meters away across open ground, now swept by enemy fire. Her watchtower, built to house 2 soldiers, contained only her and her rifle. The enemy force advancing toward her position had initially numbered around 20 fighters, but more kept appearing from the tree line. Maria counted at least 40, then 60, then stopped counting, as the numbers became meaningless. They moved with confidence, expecting minimal resistance from what intelligence had told them was a lightly defended outpost. Through her scope, Maria could see they carried assault rifles, rocket-propelled grenades, and heavy machine guns. Some wore military-style uniforms while others dressed like local civilians, suggesting a mix of trained fighters and local recruits. They advanced in coordinated groups, using standard infantry tactics to leapfrog between cover positions. These weren't untrained insurgents but experienced fighters who understood military operations. Maria's position offered excellent fields of fire across the northern approach, but it also made her extremely vulnerable. The watchtower was designed for observation and light defense, not for withstanding sustained assault by superior numbers. She had her standard-issue rifle with 6 magazines of ammunition, a total of 180 rounds. Basic math said that wasn't nearly enough ammunition to stop a force this size, especially if they concentrated their fire on her position. But Maria had advantages the enemy didn't know about. Her elevated position provided clear sightlines across 800 meters of gradually sloping terrain. The early morning light was perfect for precision shooting, and wind conditions were minimal. Most importantly, she possessed something that couldn't be taught in training: the ability to remain completely calm under extreme pressure. While adrenaline flooded her system, her breathing remained controlled, and her hands stayed steady. The first shots came from enemy positions at maximum range, as scouts tested the watchtower's defenses. Bullets struck the concrete barriers around Maria's position, sending chips of debris flying but causing no damage. Maria didn't return fire immediately. Her grandfather had taught her that patience was a sniper's greatest weapon. Let the enemy reveal their positions, identify their leaders, and choose targets that would disrupt their coordination. Through her scope, she watched enemy fighters spreading across the hillside, seeking cover behind rocks and trees while maintaining their advance. Squad leaders gestured and shouted orders, organizing their forces for what they expected would be a quick assault on an isolated watchtower. Maria selected her first target carefully, a fighter carrying what appeared to be a radio and giving directions to nearby groups. He stood partially exposed behind a large boulder, approximately 600 meters away. She controlled her breathing, applied gentle pressure to the trigger, and sent her first shot downrange. The bullet found its mark precisely, and the enemy communications coordinator dropped behind the boulder and didn't reappear. The enemy force reacted with surprise and confusion. They had expected token resistance from the watchtower, not accurate long-range fire. Fighters began seeking better cover and scanning the horizon for the source of the shot. Maria had already selected her second target, another apparent leader positioning fighters for their assault. This shot came from a slightly different angle, and again found its mark with devastating accuracy. Now, the enemy understood they faced a serious threat. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions, concentrating on the watchtower. Bullets whistled past Maria's position, striking concrete barriers and metal supports with loud cracks and pings. But the watchtower's design provided excellent protection from ground-level fire. Maria could remain concealed behind thick concrete walls while using narrow firing ports to engage targets. She continued selecting targets methodically, focusing on fighters who appeared to be leaders or those carrying heavy weapons. Each shot was calculated and precise. Taking advantage of her superior position and marksmanship skills, the enemy's advance slowed as fighters realized that approaching the watchtower meant exposing themselves to deadly, accurate fire. What should have been a quick assault was becoming a costly siege. Radio chatter revealed that other parts of the base were under equally intense pressure. The main compound was taking heavy mortar fire, and defenders were struggling to coordinate their response while under constant bombardment. "North Tower, what's your status?" Sergeant Kim's voice sounded strained over the radio. "Still holding," Maria responded while chambering another round. "Large enemy force advancing on my position. I've engaged multiple targets, but they keep coming. How many are you facing? Maria paused to count muzzle flashes and estimate enemy positions. Approximately 100 fighters, possibly more. They're using coordinated tactics and heavy weapons. The radio went silent for several seconds before Sergeant Kim responded. Copy that, North Tower. Continue holding your position. We'll send support as soon as possible. But Maria knew support might not arrive in time. The base's defenders were already stretched thin across multiple attack points, and her isolated position made rescue extremely difficult under current conditions. She was truly alone, facing overwhelming odds with limited ammunition and no backup available. Everything her critics had worried about was happening exactly as they predicted. A female soldier isolated in combat, facing a test that would challenge even the most experienced fighters. The difference was that Maria had prepared for exactly this situation her entire life, even when others doubted her capabilities. As the sun climbed higher, the battle intensified into something Maria had never imagined during her training. The enemy force had grown to nearly 200 fighters as reinforcements arrived from hidden positions throughout the surrounding hills. What started as a coordinated assault had evolved into a determined siege. Enemy commanders recognized that the watchtower's position controlled the entire northern approach to the base. They couldn't advance while Maria maintained her deadly accurate fire from the elevated position. But Maria faced a critical problem. Ammunition was running dangerously low. She had fired nearly half her rounds, with each shot carefully aimed, and most finding their targets. Yet the enemy kept coming, seemingly endless numbers emerging from concealed positions. Through her scope, she watched enemy fighters dragging heavy weapons into position. They were setting up machine guns and rocket launchers, preparing to overwhelm her position with concentrated firepower that would eventually break through even the watchtower's concrete barriers. Time was running out, but Maria's mind remained razor-sharp. Years of training and her grandfather's teachings had prepared her for exactly this moment. She began using tactics that went beyond standard military instruction. Instead of simply engaging the closest threats, Maria started targeting specific fighters whose elimination would create maximum confusion among enemy ranks. She identified ammunition carriers, weapon crews, and anyone coordinating movements between different groups. When enemy fighters moved supplies forward, Maria targeted the ammunition bearers, creating secondary explosions that disrupted entire squads. When machine gun crews tried to establish firing positions, she eliminated the gunners with precision shots that forced replacements to start over repeatedly. Her most effective tactic involved psychological warfare through precise marksmanship. Enemy fighters began to realize that advancing toward the watchtower meant almost certain death. Maria's shots were so accurate that fighters couldn't find safe positions anywhere within 800 meters of her location. The enemy's advance ground to a complete halt as fighters sought increasingly desperate cover. What should have been a quick assault had turned into a costly stalemate, with dozens of casualties and no progress toward their objective. Maria could hear frustrated shouting from enemy positions as commanders tried to reorganize their forces. Some fighters began withdrawing to safer distances, while others refused to advance despite direct orders. But the siege continued, and Maria's ammunition situation became critical. She counted her remaining rounds. 47 bullets to hold off nearly 200 enemies until help arrived. Every shot now had to count perfectly. Maria shifted to engaging only the most critical targets. Leaders attempting to reorganize the assault, weapon crews setting up heavy equipment, and fighters trying to coordinate flanking movements. She also began using the environment to her advantage. When enemy fighters clustered behind large boulders, Maria would ricochet shots off rock surfaces to reach targets in concealment. When groups tried to advance through dense vegetation, she targeted the leaders to scatter their formations. The psychological pressure on enemy fighters intensified as casualties mounted, without any progress toward capturing the watchtower. Many began questioning their commander's tactics and expressing reluctance to continue the assault. Through intercepted radio communications, Maria learned that enemy commanders were growing desperate. They had expected to overrun the base within hours, but the unexpected resistance from the northern watchtower had disrupted their entire operation. Other parts of the base were gradually stabilizing as defenders adapted to the coordinated attack. Mortar positions had been located and suppressed, and the main compound's defenses were holding against infantry assaults. But the northern approach remained the key to the enemy's success. Without controlling that route, they couldn't bring in heavy equipment or establish secure supply lines. Maria's continued resistance was preventing their entire operation from succeeding. As afternoon approached, the enemy made their most determined assault yet. Nearly 50 fighters advanced simultaneously from multiple directions, using smoke grenades and suppressing fire to mask their approach. Maria faced the most challenging shooting conditions of her life. Smoke-limited visibility, enemy fire kept her pinned behind cover, and multiple targets demanded instant decisions about priorities. Yet her training proved sufficient for even these extreme conditions. She engaged targets methodically, switching between firing ports to avoid enemy return fire, and using brief windows of opportunity to eliminate the most dangerous threats. The assault lasted 20 minutes of intense combat that felt like hours. When the smoke cleared, the hillside was littered with casualties, and the surviving enemy fighters had retreated to maximum range. Maria had used 36 rounds during the assault, leaving her with 11 bullets. But the enemy's morale had finally broken. Fighters began withdrawing from advanced positions, and radio chatter indicated growing dissent among their ranks. Just after 1400 hours, the sound of approaching helicopters announced the arrival of reinforcements. 2 Apache gunships appeared over the eastern ridge, immediately engaging enemy positions with devastating firepower. Ground reinforcements followed within minutes. A full company of infantry deployed by helicopter to sweep the surrounding hills and eliminate remaining enemy forces. The siege was over. Maria had held her position for nearly 10 hours against overwhelming odds, preventing the enemy from achieving their primary objective and buying time for base defenses to organize an effective response. As reinforcements secured the area, Maria finally descended from her watchtower. Her legs shook from exhaustion and adrenaline, but she had accomplished something remarkable. Colonel Martinez arrived with the relief force and immediately sought Maria out. His expression showed a mixture of amazement and respect that she had never seen from senior officers before. "Santos, I've been briefed on your actions today," he said, studying her with new appreciation. "Intelligence estimates you engaged a force of over 200 fighters while holding a critical defensive position single-handedly." Word of Maria's stand spread throughout the military community within days. The soldier, who had been considered unsuitable for combat, had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded those of most veteran fighters. Her former critics found themselves reassessing their assumptions about gender and combat effectiveness. Drill Sergeant Torres, who had questioned her readiness during training, personally called to congratulate her on proving him wrong. "Sometimes the toughest soldiers don't look like what we expect," he admitted during their conversation. "You've taught this old soldier something important about judging people by their actions instead of their appearance." The engagement became a case study at military academies, demonstrating how superior marksmanship, tactical thinking, and mental toughness could overcome numerical disadvantage. Maria's actions proved that combat effectiveness depended on training, skill, and determination rather than gender stereotypes. 6 months later, Maria received the Silver Star for her actions during the siege. The citation recognized her extraordinary heroism and exceptional performance under extreme combat conditions while facing overwhelming enemy forces. More importantly, her success opened doors for other female soldiers who had faced similar doubts about their combat readiness. Training programs began emphasizing marksmanship and tactical skills over physical strength, recognizing that modern warfare required different capabilities than previous generations assumed. Maria continued her military service with newfound respect from colleagues who had once questioned her abilities. She was assigned to elite units where her proven combat skills were valued without regard to gender. Years later, when asked about that day at the watchtower, Maria always emphasized the importance of preparation and mental discipline over any notion of heroism. She had simply applied her training under pressure, doing exactly what any well-prepared soldier would do in similar circumstances. But everyone who knew the details understood that what happened that day was extraordinary. A single soldier with one rifle had held back 200 enemies for 10 hours, changing perceptions about women in combat forever. The girl they said couldn't handle pressure had proven that courage and capability know no gender. She had silenced the doubters not with words, but with actions that spoke louder than any argument ever could.